It's not really a big place to get around. There are a few sites. One is the Manger Square and a lot of places to buy things. And one is the Church of St. Catherine, which has kind of catacombs underneath it, which were caves that are like what's in that area of the world. And underneath the Church of the Nativity is the cave where supposedly Jesus was born, in a cave rather than a stable, although the caves were probably stables. So the cave was interesting, but very much a tourist place, and we had a little while to hang around before we got back on the bus, and somebody suggested going to this church down the one street called the Church of the Milk. And the myth at the Church of the Milk is that after the baby was born, the Virgin's walking down the street and the baby wants to eat, so she's feeding the baby, and whatever the baby did, some milk drips on the ground and turns all the stone in Israel white. So the myth is that Jerusalem stone, of which there are 3 types, hardness and kind of porosity. One is kind of like marble and one is kind of like sandstone, but they're all the same stone, just 3 different densities, and they use them for different things. And all the buildings in Jerusalem have to be faced in the same white stone. It's very beautiful. Cool myth, but who knows what really happened. And so we went to the church, and it's pretty, also a tourist place, lots of sculptures and paintings that I found fascinating. And there's also a monastery of nuns who do perpetual adoration that's connected with this church. And as you're looking at the sculptures and the paintings, you can look to your right and see that there's a corridor that's kind of going off at an angle. It's kind of a circular corridor, and it's high, and the ceiling of the building we're in kind of stops, and then the ceiling of the corridor goes, and the walls are very plain. It's very interesting because it's light-filled, although there are no windows, and there's no artwork on the walls. So you walk down the corridor, you go down a little bit of a ramp, and you come to this large open space, which has a long ribbon window against one wall, and a glass wall between you and this sanctuary, which is down a couple of steps. There's an altar, there's a statue of the Virgin Mary, and a child, looks very German, with gold paint underneath the clothing, gold leaf shining. And there's a monstrance on the altar. And in front of the altar is a nun, a single nun, kneeling with her back to the glass wall behind which the viewers stand or sit or kneel. I did all 3. I was fascinated by this empty space and this nun who seemed to be completely motionless. She looked like she was beautiful and young. I have no idea if either of those things was true. She was motionless, and she was just kneeling in front of the tabernacle, or in front of the monstrance. And I found myself moved to prayer and to contemplating the presence and the real presence of Christ in the Eucharist. It was very moving to me. And it moved me a lot to think that these women spend their whole lives praying in front of the Blessed Sacrament, which to most of us seems like a kind of a waste. But I'm sure to them it doesn't, and I imagine to God it doesn't seem like a waste at all. So a month or 2 or 3 after leaving Israel, I was still contemplating this nun, and I had this dream. And in the dream, this painting looks most like the dream. I could see a red figure against a red background, and I could see the brush strokes at the edge of the red figure against the red background. The brush strokes looked like these, with these teeth in it. And I went to the supply store and bought a plastic spatula with teeth on it to use as a paintbrush to make these lines where the figure and the positive space and the negative space come together, with the paint crossing as though the figure and the space are completely connected. So I wanted to do that. That was what the dream was. So when I did the painting, this is what I ended up with. This blue nun in a red background. I love the painting. The nun did not have bare feet, but I made her feet bare. And at first, it might not even look like a nun. It's just a really nice shape. Liked it, and said, well, it really doesn't do what the dream did. So I did this, which I also like a lot. It's a totally different figure. You can hardly tell there's a nun there unless it's with this group, I think. And I liked that a lot, and it really looked more like the dream. And then I said, well, I'm still not done with this, and I did another one. And here she turns blue, and everything's blue. And this was completely just going with the idea and making a nun. And I stuck a monstrance in there. And I like this painting too. I don't know which one I like the most. I like them all. They don't really look like they go together except for the pose. That's the story, though.